Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for Philip for bringing us together. Um, yeah, and it looks like we are on time, so let me try to keep track of mine and make sure I don't go over. Um, Let me share my screen. No, but honestly, it's such a pleasure. Just like I've been doing this for a long time, and like it's always interesting to hear how other artists ended up doing the same. Like I feel like we are also different, but also similar in the way we almost like had to discover it almost by accident that we could combine science and art. It's I wish we had more of these events so that we uh, wouldn't take so long. But anyway, so yeah, just I'm gonna tell you a bit about my work, particularly related to comics. Um, First of all, as a brief introduction, as has been mentioned, I'm currently working as a scientific multimedia producer at Columbia Zuckerman Institute, which is the main research institute at Columbia dedicated to the brain. And this is how I represented this in this illustration. So it's like there are many different things that are going on at the institute. There are scientists working on all kind of aspects of neuroscience, and our job, I'm not alone, I'm part of the communication team. Our job is to translate this exciting research into something a bit more engaging or easier to understand for non-scientists. And this takes many forms. Of course, we have science writers, filmmakers. My job in particular is to help scientists with visuals. So again, even within my job there, I do many different things. I do from more traditional science diagrams and graphic abstracts to some covers, which we're already talking about. Those are always very fun when the scientists try to think more creatively about their work. So I help them with these illustrations, but sometimes we get them published. And yeah, when I have more time, we also love to do animations. I've been learning animation and motion graphics to really make this visual explainers when we want to go in depth into something. This, of course, take much more time. I was actually working on one right now while I was listening to all of you. So it's nice to have some company. But my real passion and the things I'm gonna talk about today mostly is comics. So I grew up reading comics. I love to draw. I love to tell stories. So I slowly started making comics. I never even really thought of them as art because I think comics still unfortunately suffer from this like prejudice that it's not real art. It's just something for children. It's not very serious. And maybe that's why like the two things really clashed in my head. So yeah, sorry, I am a scientist. I study neuroscience. I did a whole PhD in neuroscience. Um, that's why I ended up here. But yeah, like for many years I couldn't really figure out a way to combine the two things because comics are really kind of the opposite of science. Science is supposed to be very serious, very formal, and comics, at least the comics I was reading at the time, were they're not serious at all. They're like science fiction or like superhero comics. So for many years, I kept these two things very, very separate. I was doing my science during the day. I was trying to be a professional PhD, and I was just drawing comics in my free time, in my evenings and weekends. And I honestly like never even thought they could mix. Um, that all changed at the end of my PhD when together with a friend of mine, another scientist in the lab, Anna Ross, we got this grant from the Wellcome Trust, which, if you don't know them, they are this really great foundation in the UK. They support basic research, but they also want to make sure the research is accessible. So they have, since they used to have grants for science communication. And yeah, we got a grant to make this comic, Neurocomic, which honestly, at the beginning, I was kind of surprised and a bit skeptic. I mean, I thought it would be fun, but I didn't really know if there would be an audience for this thing. But yeah, we worked on it together. And yeah, from the very beginning, we made clear it wasn't, we didn't want to make it just an illustrated textbook. We really want to tell a story. Because I think that's what comics are great at. So as you can see, it was my first book. It was all black and white. This is all still drawn like ink on paper. But we really try to have it as character driven as possible. So all the scientists is translated into these metaphors and characters that try to tell the story of neuroscience without being too didactic. And whatever the reason, whether it's the story or the beautiful cover, the publisher helped us do, the book was very successful. And like that's where my career is kind of unique, because I can really pinpoint like this was like before after event. So the book came out at the end of my PhD, and I was already like thinking of like doing something other than research, but I didn't know what to do. And then this comic came out and got a lot of press, got a lot of attention. It's now translated in over 10 languages, which, like, without being modest, is still kind of boggles my mind. But so yeah, that kind of gave me like the confidence to like try to do this more seriously. And I started doing not just comics, of course, but illustrations and animations about science. So I was working as a freelance for a few years. But because I had this academic background, I also I kind of really wanted to know like why comics, because it was at the time at least like this kind of new format, and so I was trying to figure out what could comics offer to science communication compared to, say, animation or traditional illustration or diagrams. And I was very lucky. I got this other unique opportunity at Columbia University, thanks to the Center for Science and Society. I got 3 years. It was essentially a postdoc fellowship to research, to really like study this new field. And I also wrote some articles about it if you want to get really geeky about it. But the main thing, there are many things that comics can do. The main thing I want to kind of point out today, I think, because it's unique to comics maybe compared to other formats. Although, I mean, like video games, I think, like do a lot of the same things. But yeah, this idea of storytelling. And storytelling is something we don't really think about in science. Like we maybe associate it more with entertainment. But storytelling has been studied a lot, both in the humanities and the science, psychology. And it really seems to be this sort of universal cognitive mechanism. It's not just for fun. Like it's really how our brain processes information. This is actually a graphic I did for Scientific American, because they had a whole article about how even telling your own story through these like basic steps, narrative steps that have been identified by many authors, leads to a better understanding, better satisfaction with your life. So there's something really pleasing about the stories and certain patterns of stories. And I think this can be very useful in communication, in science communication and education, because the way I try to summarize it here visually is that when we write a paper, like a scientific paper, it's very expository, it's very dry, and it puts all the weight, the responsibility on the reader. Like we assume the reader really wants to understand it. So it makes sense for experts. But for non-experts, if you put the same content into narrative format, then it becomes much easier to remember, much more engaging. And I think that's what comics are great at doing, because comics literally, they are defined often sequential art. So you can use panels to literally break down the steps. And I think these are easier to understand and to follow. You can also play with the size of the panel to suggest the sense of duration. And beyond that, you can really like play with the comic layout. And something many comic scholars point out, that the comics are both linear. So in that sense, they work like a text or animation, but they're also non-linear. So you can see them all at once. And when you do that, you can do more interesting things. You can look at the same thing from different angles. You can put things into context. But of course, to tell stories, the main thing you need is characters, right? And there's like different ways you can do this. An obvious thing is to put scientists in the narratives, and this is something I've been doing with this project as part of my work at Columbia. We tell these very short, like 6-panel stories about the origin stories, how scientists got started. We have now more than 40 of these, and it's not just about, we also try not to just cover the PIs and the senior science, but also grad students, undergraduates, technicians, like anybody who works there, how do they get there? What drives them? Another way to tell stories, if they want to focus on the scientist, is to make up characters. And that's something I do all the time. And I know some scientists kind of have mixed feelings about this, but because we are anthropomorphizing science. But I think, again, this allows you to tell stories where there are no stories. Something else you can do is put the humans, kind of scale down the humans and put them into the science. This is something I've done in the series of covers for Mad Masters, which they're basically like they're quite scientific, but then just putting a character in there, something I learned from comics, I think really helps the reader, draws in the reader, and makes everything more exciting and gives a sense of scale, of embodied understanding of what's going on. You can also make up metaphors, as I did in Neurocomic. So you can turn the old science into the setting. And again, this is something I think like really special you can do in comics. You can tell a whole story set into a city, which is also a brain. And yeah, I think it's a very different way of engaging with the science. And this is something I'm doing. This is a new series I'm publishing in Italy, Graphic Anatomy. Each one is a different organ. And yeah, as you can see, I'm trying to turn them into different settings and cities. Well, I'm actually ending kind of earlier, so maybe I went too fast. But if anybody has more questions or wants to follow up, again, I love to talk about this stuff. I love to talk about comics. And also, maybe I should point out, like, when I started, I thought I felt like I was the only one. There are many of us, though, and I started a website, Cartoon Science. I should add the link here, but I try to collect all kind of science comics and science animations I can find. Since I have time, actually, maybe I should just show you. Because I think, again, that when I started, I didn't know this was a thing, so I had to kind of rediscover it by myself. But there is a lot happening, and I think the problem is often visibility. Like when we are studying science, we think we are the only one that care about this stuff, but there are so many people. And so yeah, this was for me was very motivating to see that there are other people doing, and like also learning how different people are doing this. So yeah, if you're interested in comics, I kind of suggest this is the place to start. You can really see the variety of things you can do with comics. And yeah, after this, I'm gonna pass it on to Marcia Munafo, who's it's like me. We never overlapped, but we are both Italian scientists, both studied in Rome. But unlike me, Marcia is still working as a scientist. She's doing both the postdoc and working as a science artist. And I honestly don't know how you can do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Neither do I.
How you juggle the two. And thank you all.